Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll just share the slide. Hare Krishna, everyone. So last week we covered the preface of the Nectar of Devotion, and with all of you, I shared the homework for 4 weeks. So I shared the homework ahead also because this way you have it in advance. You can pace yourself accordingly. But it's not all for 1 week, what I shared with you. So please don't get confused. And also I shared the study guide with you. So the study guide is very, very useful starting now. It actually doesn't cover the preface, but starting this chapter, the study guide is very useful. It's written by Dhanadhar Swami, who did a very in-depth study of the Nectar of Devotion. And his book, The Waves of Devotion, is like a classic in terms of the study of the Nectar of Devotion. So I shared the first part of that study guide. And as we progress, I'll share the second and third parts as well. So so that's the story on that. So now you may remember, somehow the fonts are not good here, but I apologize, the diacritics are not coming. But you remember in our last class, we explained the term Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. We discussed the significance of Srila Rupa Goswami, and we identified Prabhupada's purposes in writing the Nectar Devotion and discussed their relevance. So, so these were the 3 things that we did. We explained the term Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, what is the meaning of each word. We discussed Rupa Goswami's importance in our tradition, how we're Rupa Nugas, and why Srila Prabhupada wrote this Nectar of Devotion, which he very clearly said is the law book of the Krishna consciousness movement. So someone has asked the question in the chat, who is the author? The author of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is Srila Rupa Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada is the author of the Nectar of Devotion.
No, Prabhuji, I was asking the book that you referred, the study guide that you have given.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so that's Dhanadhar Swami. As I mentioned, it's Dhanadhar Swami. He wrote that study guide. And the name of the book is Waves of Devotion, and you can get it also. It's not that easy to get, so that's why I'm giving it to you in PDF format, but you can also get it. You can order the entire book in a bound form. It's very nice. So this chapter 1, is the definition of pure devotional service. So in this one, Rupa Goswami talks about what is pure devotional service, what is the definition of it, and how can we practice it. This is possibly the most important chapter, the most foundational chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. And this is the introduction. So it's lesson 2 for us, but this is the introduction. So at this point, we haven't even started the actual Nectar Devotion. This is Rupa Goswami's own Nectar introduction to the Nectar Devotion, which is very much, you could say, a central theme. So our objectives are to explain the definition of pure devotional service with reference to the Swarup and the Tatastha Lakshana. I don't know why the fonts are coming like this. So to explain this in terms of Swarup and Tatastha Lakshana, so what are the primary and secondary characteristics of pure devotional service? Discuss examples of pure and mixed devotional service. So what are some examples from Shastra of pure devotional service? And this chapter begins with the Mangalacharan, which is invoking auspiciousness. Did I discuss last time the different parts of a Mangalacharan? Does anyone remember? I can't remember if I discussed that or not.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, we
Yes.
just discussed the preface, Prabhuji. We didn't discuss this one, the attributes of Mangalacharan. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So there are different parts or sections to a Mangalacharan. And the first part of the Mangalacharan is that it invokes auspiciousness, oftentimes by offering prayers. So this is the very important, very primary aspect of a Mangalacharan, is that it invokes auspiciousness. Mangalacharan is basically, again, it's the introduction. This is why it is Rupa Goswami's introduction. It's the Sanskrit way, the authentic way, the original way of writing an introduction. So before the word introduction came and we were writing in English or in the modern world, the way they wrote the introduction was the Mangalacharan. So introduction means Mangalacharan. Lord Shri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the reservoir of all rasas or relationships. So Lord Shri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, the reservoir of all rasas or relationships. So Rupa Goswami is beginning with these words, Akhila Rasamrita Murti, that this book is about Krishna, who is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. He is the Murti, the embodiment of Akhila, varieties, all varieties of rasa. And this rasa is not just any rasa, it is Amrita. And who is that? That is Vrindavan Krishna. So Vrindavan Krishna is the embodiment of all variegated rasas. So I'm going to just try one thing. I'm going to try to get this font to work because this is very annoying. Let me just do this. Definitely have it somewhere where I can. Here we go. I think it's in here. Let me see. Okay, got it. So this is now fixed. Okay, so Mangalacharan, the first thing that it does is it invokes auspiciousness. And by invoking auspiciousness, part of invoking auspiciousness is defining the objective of the book. So a Mangalacharan is called, the first part is called Vastu Nirdesha. You define the objective. And this objective is none other than Vrindavan Krishna. The objective of the Nectar devotion is not to talk about Narayan. It's not to discuss Dwarka Krishna, which is the objective of many books. Like even in the Bhagavatam, the 10th canto deals specifically with Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. But you also find his Dwarka pastimes. In the Bhagavatam, you find descriptions of Vaikuntha, of Krishna's different incarnations. But all of these things are not of concern for Srila Rupa Goswami in this book. This book is only going to speak about Krishna, Vrindavan Krishna, and particularly speak about that person, Krishna, who is Akhila Rasamrita Murti, who is the embodiment of all the different rasas, Akhila Rasamrita, who's always joyful, who's just bursting with different rasas and relationships. And that great personality, Shri Krishna, is the subject matter of this book. So what does the Mangalacharan do? It does three things. It contains three objectives. It defines the book's objective, which we saw right now. Rupa Goswami saying that this is about Vrindavan Krishna, Akhila Rasamrita Murti. It allows the author to pay obeisances, which we will also see Rupa Goswami doing. He also offers obeisances to his readers and to the previous acharyas. And finally, it allows the readers to receive the blessings of the Supreme Lord. So it gives blessings. It defines the objective. The author offers obeisances and receives blessings, and then it also blesses the reader. Just like many places in the Bhagavatam, you hear and read how there's a phala shruti. If you read this chapter of the Bhagavatam, then you will have children. If you read this chapter of the Bhagavatam, no one will ever be able to conquer you. You'll be unconquerable. If you read this chapter of the Bhagavatam, then you will never lose in a battle. So these are different phala shrutis, but the ultimate phala shruti that the Bhagavatam gives is that by reading the Bhagavatam, you get pure devotional service. You get unalloyed love for Krishna. In the same way, there's many narrations that, reading or hearing about Srimati Radharani and Radha Kund gives you love for Radharani. So here in the Nectar devotion, Rupa Goswami will tell us what are the blessings that one receives by reading this great narration. So here is his Mangalacharan. Akhila Rasamrita Murti, Prashmara Ruchi Ruddha, Taraka Pali, Kalita Shyama Lalito, Radha Priyan, Vidhur Jayati. So we have the Nectar devotion, which is the summary study. But if you get the actual Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which I think I shared the link on the group, Bhanu Swami has done a translation of the actual Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in its completeness, like with all the verses and the translations, then this will be the first verse of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is the Mangalacharan. And we just covered the first line and the first important part of the Mangalacharan, which is defining the objective. Here is the entire verse, and we'll read it together. Let Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, be glorified. By virtue of his expanding attractive features, he subjugated the gopis named Taraka and Pali and absorbed the minds of Shama and Lalita. He is the most attractive lover of Srimati Radharani and is the reservoir of pleasure for devotees in all transcendental mellows. So very, you could say, confidential verse. Doesn't seem like a Mangalacharan. It seems more like describing Krishna's confidential pastimes. But indeed, through this, he is doing his Mangalacharan. I'm going a little fast because I have limited time here. I will have to, uh, uh, go for the next thing soon. So, Srila Sanatan Goswami and the devotees are like Makara, kings of the fishes, joyful in the ocean of rasa. So, here it's being described how Krishna is Akila Rasamrita Murti, and how he's a reservoir of all pleasures, of all mellows, and he absorbs the minds of all the gopis. And in the same section, Rupa Goswami describes how the devotees, they are like the fishes who dive very deep into this ocean of rasa. You'll find this in your study guide as well, that this love for Krishna is like an ocean. Krishna's pastimes are like an ocean. And I was talking about this last class, and even if we get one drop of this ocean, it's more than what we can handle, right? I mentioned this last time. Well, the great devotees of the Lord, like Srila Sanatan Goswami, they are like the fishes. What to speak of getting a drop? They dive deep into the ocean and they swim in this ocean of love for God. So in saying this, what part of the Mangalacharan is Rupa Goswami doing? Who can say? We said that Mangalacharan has three parts. The first part was defining the objective, which we just did. Now, what's the second part?
He's paying his respect to the previous acharyas.
Yes,
Their
he's
blessings.
offering his obeisances, right? The second one was offering obeisances, and like you're saying, paying respects to the previous acharyas. So Rupa Goswami's elder brother is Srila Sanatan Goswami. And so Sanatan Goswami, he's glorifying him that these devotees, they are the king of fishes. And they don't just stand on the side observing this ocean of rasa. They dive deep into this ocean of rasa. Srila Rupa Goswami prays that the book may smother the tongues of the followers of jnana and karma, who are like volcanoes in the ocean. So the ocean has many things, and this is the ocean of bhakti rasa. The fishes, they dive deep into the ocean and they take advantage of this ocean. But some jnanis and mental speculators and the sahajas, they simply cause disturbance. They cause disturbance in this ocean of rasa. And they are like the volcanoes who disturb, who cause great havoc in this ocean, in this beautiful ocean of Krishna Bhakti. So may those who are wishing to cause disturbance, may they not read this book, Rupa Goswami says, may they not cause disturbance in this book, or may this book smother the tongues, meaning quiet them, silence them. And this is actually a fact that the devotee of the Lord wants to distribute love of God to everyone and give them Krishna Bhakti. But as far as Krishna's confidential pastimes and knowledge about him, the devotee does not share these with the jnanis and karmis. Why? Because the Shastras actually say that they simply cause disturbance when they get this esoteric knowledge. So this book, Nectar Devotion, very key, it is for devotees. It's really not for the general public. All of Srila Prabhupada's books are distributed because Prabhupada explains it so that the new person can also understand. Through his mercy, they can understand. But still, Nectar Devotion is not the real, first-time book that devotees do on the streets. Sometimes they may, but the Bhagavad Gita, the Nectar of Instruction, Ishopanishad, these are more introductory books. This book, Nectar Devotion, is for more mature devotees, or at least those who are seriously starting the process of devotional service. So this is not something that is just meant for those who are have no faith in the Lord. And there's one quotation that is there, that when neophyte devotees, when they try to discuss the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, or when they speak about those pastimes, they actually cause disturbance in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Because Krishna is present in his narrations, in his leelas. So by discussing it in a vulgar way, by not understanding the import and the meaning of those pastimes, these people cause disturbance, and therefore it's an offense. This is why discussing the Rasa Leela amongst neophyte devotees is not just unfruitful, but it's also an offense, because it takes something very exalted, takes someone very pure, and brings them in contact with people who are not ready for that knowledge. So the second thing that Rupa Goswami prays is that those who are not the devotees of the Lord, they may be pacified by this ocean of rasa, and they may not cause a disturbance in this ocean of rasa. So what is Srila Prabhupada's mood now? The author of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami, very humbly submits that he is just trying to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, although he humbly thinks himself unfit for this work. That should be the attitude of all preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement, following in the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami. We should never think of ourselves as great preachers, but should always consider that we are simply instrumental to the previous acharyas, and simply by following in their footsteps, we may be able to do something for the benefit of suffering humanity. Such a beautiful paragraph. Like what Srila Prabhupada, what he writes and the way that he speaks is so, you could see it's just otherworldly. What is the mood of a devotee? What is the mood of a great person? The mood of a devotee is one of humility, of humble service. The mood of a great devotee is not one of lording it over, that I am the best preacher, let me see what I can do. The mood of a great devotee is one of assistance. He is trying to assist the previous acharyas in their work. Who are we to preach? Even we have a desire to preach because our spiritual master tells us to, because we want to help. But who are we to preach? What qualification do we have? What advancement do we have to preach? That we feel that we can be a preacher, that we should have a following or a group. I remember one time I went to my spiritual master and I told him, I said, Guru Maharaj, I would really just like to preach now. And, I finished my education and I'd like to use it in Krishna service and preach to the, students, and just on and on. I went for like 5 minutes telling him how much I wanted to serve by preaching. And I still remember after that, he just laughed out of pity for me, just laughed, because then I realized my mood was wrong. Though preaching a service, our mood has to be one of service. We don't feel ourselves qualified to be preachers. And I'm sitting there in front of my spiritual master and saying that I want to preach, when my duty is to assist the spiritual master in his preaching. You see? So even the desire to preach ourselves is a proud desire, because it means that we have some qualification. The devotee's desire is to assist in the preaching of the advanced devotees. And actually we see that that's when preaching is very effective. That's when our preaching actually has a lot of power, is when we are not doing our own preaching, but helping a more advanced devotee, a devotee who's more advanced than us, when we are helping them preach. Then in that way, we are also preaching, right? But then that preaching is very powerful because they're advanced, they know how to preach, they have the purification, the quality to preach, and we are helping them in their preaching work. And that's the highest service. Just like if you're fighting a battle, right? Right now, there's a big battle between Russia and Ukraine. And a citizen thinks, I'm going to go and fight Russia. A Ukrainian citizen thinks. And so they pull out their little, kitchen knife, and they run out on the street, and they, stand in the front lines to fight with Russia. What's going to happen? They're just going to get killed very quickly. But if that same person joins the army and fights under a great commander, then their same work, their same surrender will be so much more effective, because that commander has the experience, they have the weapons, they have the knowledge, and they have the resources, they have everything. They also have the blessings of the government. In the same way, if we go and try to preach ourselves, or want to be the preachers, then our preaching will be very limited. But if we preach on the order of and in the assistance of a great devotee, a great general, then it will have great effect. So that's why the key thing is to offer service, to help those who are actually qualified to preach, who are purified and are qualified, and who are empowered by Krishna. Prabhupada says in one place, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita says, in order to actually preach, one has to be empowered by Krishna. To actually touch lives, one has to be empowered. So we can go and do, nice PR programs, but the real effect will come when we have empowerment. And until we don't have that empowerment, we should help those who have that empowerment, who have been told by Krishna. I noticed this also in my own experience with my spiritual master, that when I offered him, then he just laughed. But then a few minutes later, one senior devotee came in, and then, a devotee who I knew very closely, and my Guru Maharaj, the first thing he asked them, he says, you should preach. You should preach to the Westerners, and you should make devotees. And they didn't offer anything, but then he said, you should preach and make devotees. And it was just a few minutes ago, I was asking him to do the same thing, but he was making that point very clear. So this is empowerment. That person was ready. They had served, they're purified. He could see, now he's ready to help. Of course, preaching itself purifies us, but the preaching that purifies us is the preaching that we do in assistance to the great devotee. So now, this is a bit of a framework of the different sections of this ocean of bhakti. And these are the different parts of it. We'll get more into this, but for now, you can just make a note that the east part of the ocean, the eastern section of the ocean, talks about the types of bhakti. The west talks about the primary rasas. The north talks about the secondary rasas, and the south talks about the rasa ingredients. So the nectar of devotion, or the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is divided into different directions of this ocean of devotion. And we are starting with the Eastern Ocean. This is the Eastern Ocean of devotion that we're talking about. So the first thing that Rupa Goswami talks about are the types of bhakti. This Eastern part is chapters 1 through 19. It's the Purva Vibhaga, and this is the subject matter of our study in the Bhakti Shastri. The other sections are so wonderful, but we won't get time to cover them. In the Bhakti Shastri, we don't cover them. So this eastern side has 4 main sections. The first one, which we're doing right now, is the overview of devotion. The second one is devotional service and practice, which is what? What is devotional service and practice in Sanskrit? I apologize for this background noise.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So, devotional service in practice means following the 9 limbs that are further called categorized into 64.
Yes, very good. Yes, 9 limbs, which are further characterized into 64 limbs of devotional service. But go ahead.
Prayojan, so there are 3 things, right, where you practice the actual service. It's called prayojan, or I'm sorry, I'm not able to take the exact word.
What you're saying, Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan.
Correct, Abhideya. This is the
Okay.
Abhideya part, maybe? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, devotional service and practice is Abhideya. Yes, very good. Yes. So the first part, overview of devotional service, which is called Samanya Bhakti, is in some ways Sambandha, knowledge about devotional service. Devotional service in practice is Abhideya, and devotional service in pure love of God is Prayojan. And ecstasy is kind of in the middle. It's also Abhideya, also, it's, yeah. So that's one way to characterize this, very good. But then there's another term that specifically refers to devotional service in practice.
Sadhana, Prabhu. Sadhana
Very
Bhakti.
nice. Yes, this is sadhana bhakti. Devotional service in practice is sadhana bhakti. So, I'm going to skip a few things. I'll come back to it in the next class, but I want to get to a certain point right now. So here we go. So the first section that we're doing right now is called Samanya Bhakti. That's the study guide I just sent you on the WhatsApp group that I had sent you before. That's the introduction, the preface, the introduction up to chapter 1. This is the general description or overview of devotional service. The next section, chapters 2 to 16, is Sadhana Bhakti. As you can see, the majority of the chapters are dedicated to Sadhana Bhakti because this is most relevant to us. This is the stage where we are at. And then only 2 chapters on Bhava Bhakti, even though it's so great, so much to speak about, only 2 chapters. And finally, the final chapter is Prema Bhakti, just 1 chapter, pure love of Krishna. So this is the eastern side of the ocean, the Bhagavad Bhakti Veda, and the varieties of devotional service. This is what the eastern side covers. Now, the other sections on the other sides, this is what they cover. Like the southern side covers the 5 components, an overview of rasa and the 5 different components of that. The primary rasas is the western side. These are the 5 main rasas that we always talk about. The northern side talks about the secondary rasas. So in this way, the deeper we go into rasa, the deeper we go into the different waves of love of God, the more we read into the nectar devotion. The more we read into the nectar devotion, the deeper we go. But for our purposes, we're here on the eastern side. And this is what we're most concerned with. So Prabhupada gives us an overview of this eastern side. In the first part, there are 4 waves. The first being the general description of devotional service right here. So this is the eastern side of the ocean, and the eastern side of the ocean has 4 waves. Samanya Bhakti. Then the second concerns the regulated principles for executing devotional service, Sadhana Bhakti. And the third wave, devotional service and ecstasy, is what?
Bhava Bhakti.
Bhava Bhakti. Very nice. And in the fourth is the ultimate goal of love of God, which is what?
Krishna Prema Prabhuji.
Prema Bhakti, yes. So these are our progressive stages to come to the ultimate stage of pure love for Krishna. So now, Samanya Bhakti, or the general overview of devotional service, the first most important thing, and this is, now we've come to the main subject matter of the introduction, is the definition of pure devotional service. Now remember, this is the definition of pure devotional service, not just devotional service, but pure devotional service. And here is that definition. Anya bhilashita shunyam yana karmadyanavritam anukulina krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttamam. Anya bhilashita shunyam yana karmadyanavritam anukulina krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttamam. So, this is a verse that all of you will put to heart. Definitely, if nothing else, this is the one verse that you must memorize and know in and out through your studies of the Nectar devotion. It's our guiding star. It's the verse that guides us on how to perform pure devotional service to Krishna. So let's dissect it. But this is the translation. Before we do that, when first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires. Knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy and fruitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires. Knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy one second. It's free from all material desires. It's free from knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy, free from fruitive action. So the desire for a fruit, for a material fruit or manifestation, and it is constant and is favorably done for Krishna. These are the different parts of this translation. So we will divide this into what is known as the Swarup Lakshana and the Tatashta Lakshana. So the definition of pure devotional service can be divided into two parts. The Swarup Lakshana, which is the essential characteristics, the principal statements, statement, and Tatashta Lakshana, which are the marginal characteristics, further qualities. So Rupa Goswami explains that this is the two aspects of any definition. When you define something, like, what is a human being? What is a living being? Then there'll be some characteristics that are essential to that object. In essence, the human being is a soul, right? And then there's some characteristics that are marginal characteristics, some things that are secondary, but are part of the definition, but are less important in defining it. Like another example is like sugar. The primary characteristic is that sugar is sweet. Anything that is sweet is sugar. If it's salty, it's not sugar. The marginal characteristics may be that, it's, white in color and it's powdery and it's, dissolves in your mouth. So in the same way, pure devotional service has certain qualities that are, the definition has certain qualities that are characteristic, that are key to it, essential to it, and others that are marginal. So the Swarup Lakshana, the essential characteristics, are 3 in number that are described in this verse through 3 words. Anukulena, Krishna Anushilanam. And the Tatashta Lakshana, or the secondary characteristics, are 2 in number. That it is Anya Bhilashita Shunyam. And secondly, it is Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam. Which is very interesting because it shows us what matters most to Krishna. So Anukulena, this word means favorably done. Pure devotional service must be favorably done for Krishna. So Kansa was also doing devotional service by thinking about Krishna constantly, but he was doing so in hatred, fear, and anger. And therefore, his devotional service was not pure devotional service. He was doing devotional service, but not pure devotional service. The pure devotional service is service that is done favorably, right? So that is anukulena. And then Krishna anushilanam. It is done favorably, but for whom? Not for Devi or Durga or Shiva. It is done for Krishna. So Rupa Goswami explains that devotional service, pure devotional service, can only apply to Krishna. You cannot do pure devotional service for a demigod. And we'll see why. Because it's actually impossible to worship a demigod without any motivation, any ulterior motivation, because one only worships a demigod for some wealth, for some material thing. And pure devotional service is done only for love. It's not done for some material thing, as we will see. So pure devotional service means devotional service for Krishna. And then secondly, devotion means shilanam, or activity. Devotion is not simply an emotion or sentiment. This is why Prabhupada is so accurate in his usage of words when he translates Sanskrit into English. This is why Prabhupada always translates bhakti as devotional service. He doesn't translate it as just devotion or love, as other scholars do. Why? Because of this principle of shilanam, that pure devotional service must be activity done for Krishna. It is service. It is not sentiment. It is not, just an emotion or feeling. It is service. Even hearing and chanting is a service. Therefore, it is pure devotional service. But it is active service. And not just any service. The word anu here is very significant. Anu means it is service done following in the footsteps of the great souls. Anushilanam. So service in disciplic succession. Not just activity, but activity in the service of God. So anukulena, favorably done for Krishna, and it is activity following in the footsteps of the acharyas or the spiritual master, that is activity done for Krishna. Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam. These are the Swarup Lakshanas of pure devotional service. The Tatashta Lakshana is Anyabhilashata Shunyam. So the first thing is that there are no ulterior abhilashas or motivations. So it is unmotivated. Now you might think, oh, this should be a primary characteristic, but it's the secondary characteristic. The primary thing is it's done for Krishna. It's activity done for Krishna in the disciplic succession. Secondary is that it's unmotivated. Anyabhilashita. Because motivation is not good, but still, even if it's motivated, if it's done for Krishna, it will purify our heart. If it's done according to the instruction of the spiritual master, it will purify our heart. And the second thing is jnana karmadhyanavrtam. It is free from the impurities of mental speculation. Like the gopis of Vrindavan, they have knowledge of Krishna, but even that knowledge, they throw it away when it comes to love. That knowledge of Krishna takes a secondary role because too much knowledge comes in the middle of love. If they have knowledge of Krishna's majesty all the time, how can they love Krishna spontaneously? So jnana can refer to many things. Jnana ultimately is a disturbance. And this is very true in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, that you see that knowledge was actually not so prized. Ecstatic love for Krishna was the goal, was something that was really important. Jnana and then karma, which means fruit of activities. So it's free from this fruitive mentality. It's free from these sacrifices and rituals that people do for fruitive benefit. Like the Bhagavatam begins with this dharma projita kaitava, that the Bhagavatam begins with the principle that I reject all dharmas with ulterior motivations. Materialistic religion. This is what karma refers to, materialistic religion. It's free from the impurities of materialistic religion. Okay, so I have to go quickly, so I'm going to skip some of these things. Anushilanam is devotional activities. And this has two parts, Prabhupada explains. One is the pravritti, devotional activities for Krishna done through body, mind, and words. And the nivritti is devotional activities which entails avoiding the activities that are bad with body, mind, and words. Things that are bad for my body, for my mind, for my words, that don't lead me to Krishna. Those are things that I avoid. So Anushilanam refers to both positive and negative activities, the giving up of negative activities, the acceptance of positive activities. Like Rupa Goswami says, always remember Krishna and never forget him. So now, Anya Bilashita Shunyam. This point I want to cover here, because there's one important part of this. Anya Bilashita Shunyam. Anya means other, Abhilasha means desire, Shunyam, right? Void. So Shunyam, there's no other desires other than the service of Krishna. But then someone might question is, well, what about the desire to eat food? I mean, a devotee desires, even great devotees, they desire to eat nice food. Prabhupada, asked sometimes for puris. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was also very particular about the quality of the food that he got. Sometimes Prabhupada had a desire to get a massage to keep his, body and soul together. He was an elderly person. He needed care. His devotees would massage his body. So devotees have other desires. So here, this is actually a very, because of the significance of this verse, there's a lot to it. There's the word here, ita, anya abhilashita shunyam. And by this syllable ta, Rupa Goswami says that what this signifies is that desires for the service of Krishna, desires that are I forget the word that he uses, that ordinary desires, or desires that do not come in the middle of our service to Krishna. Those desires are not considered as anyabhilasha. So if a devotee is drowning in the ocean and the devotee cries out to Krishna, "Oh Krishna, please save me," then that desire of Krishna, of the devotee saying, "Oh Krishna, please save me," is not considered a desire that is in contradiction with devotional service. It's not considered to be a desire that comes in the middle of one's service to Krishna, because that desire is meant in some ways for the service of Krishna. It's related to the service of Krishna, although not directly, but indirectly, because the devotee needs to save his life in order to serve Krishna. Or even not, actually the devotee doesn't have to save his life to serve Krishna, because if he dies, then in his next life, he'll also be serving Krishna. But that desire is natural. It comes as part of the fact of being embodied. It is, the devotee knows that Krishna most likely wants him to live. And therefore, he has that desire. The same thing, like I explained, of Srila Prabhupada, right? Wanting puris. He had that desire. But that desire is just part of who he is, or his desire to have fried eggplant. It is part of his nature and just an expression of his being a devotee, that he enjoys Krishna prasadam. Such desires are okay. But ulterior motivation means that when our desire comes in conflict with Krishna's desire, then it is an ulterior motivation. So I have my desire and Krishna has. I'm collecting for Krishna, but I want to keep some for myself so I can become rich. But if the desire is simply, I just need enough to sustain myself, that can still be pure devotional service, because that desire is a desire for oneself, but it is not in conflict with one's service to Krishna. In some ways, it is part of that service, and it assists in that service. You see what I mean? So service to Krishna is unmotivated and it is uninterrupted. It is free from ulterior motive and it is constant. Like the example given, Taila Dhara, that pure devotional service flows like oil flows, not like water. When water flows, there's breakage. But when oil flows, it's very, very smooth. There's no breakage. And these are the two very important qualities, unmotivated and uninterrupted. This word ta is very important. So even if we see that a devotee has, some necessities, some desires for a proper place to stay, or, those desires do not come in the category of ulterior motivations. Okay, so we've covered the definition of pure devotional service. Next time, I would actually like to start from this. I'll go a little more deeper into this, and then we'll start chapter 1, which is the 6 characteristics of devotional service. I'll need to stop here at this time, and I only have a few minutes for questions. So I see there's one question. I'll just take that question, or maybe there's 2, and then we will continue. So Kamala Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I have a question here. So how we will categorize whether our desire is for our sense gratification or for the service of Krishna? Because there is a very thin line between them, I feel.
Yes, and that's the whole thing. This is why it's a science, and we have Anya Vilashita Shunyam, right? The word ta, that's why Rupa Goswami is put there. Because the key deciding factor is that desire compatible with service? Is that desire a distraction, or is that compatible? Like regulated sense enjoyment is still an ulterior motivation, because it's still sense enjoyment. And that's why we can do devotional service along with regulated sense enjoyment, but we cannot do pure devotional service along with that. On the level of pure devotional service, there's no sense enjoyment. But if one has to sustain one's senses and the body, that is not exactly sense enjoyment. That is simply the desire to sustain oneself for the service of Krishna. It's still spiritual sense enjoyment, so to say. It's still the spiritual senses that are being enjoyed. Yes, or the spirituals not enjoyed, but it's in the realm of the spiritual senses. It's for the service of Krishna. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chandra Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna. You're muted, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dalit Pranam Prabhuji, all Prabhupada. Thank you so much for the class. Prabhu, one thing just popped in my mind is you said in the slide there are a couple of words like when you say material desire and fruitive activity, Prabhuji. So how do we differentiate between these? Can you please elaborate, Prabhuji?
So anya vilashita shunyam, material desires, material motivation specifically refers to some motivation in our devotional service, right? So I'm doing service, but I also have the desire to be famous and rich. That is abhilasha. Karma refers to activities that are not in the realm of devotional service. So doing, Durga Puja, this is karma. And saying, well, I'll do it. Now, the gopis are also doing it, but only for the service of Krishna, only to have Krishna as their husband. So there is overlap there for sure, but karma refers to activities that are not devotional service. And anya vilashita refers to doing devotional service, but having ulterior motivation.
Okay, Prabhu. Yeah, it's clear now. Thank you.
Which is connected because I mean, you can do karma, fruit of activities, only for Krishna and its pure devotional service, like the gopis were doing it. But generally speaking, karma refers to the flowery words of the Vedas, doing acting according to Shastra, but it's on the level of fruit of activity.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. So again, I apologize for the brief class today. I got in at 11 o'clock last night, and then we're in this, I'm in this hotel, and I'm actually sharing a room with His Grace Anutma Prabhu. So he's a very exalted personality. This is why I couldn't use my room. So I went searching for another room. I thought they always have it, and I planned ahead, but there's nothing there. So I went, floor to floor, and then finally found this little corner here. So my apologies, but starting next week, I think everything should be back to normal. We'll have a normal 2-hour class, and I will really get deep into this. Thank you for bearing with me. Please read the homework, enjoy the homework. The main ecstasy is in reading and in answering these questions. And the study guide, particularly in this book, is very helpful. So please use the study guide. It goes just what I covered. It goes point by point, and it explains everything. So if you didn't follow something today, the same points that I made in terms of the definition of pure devotional service are there in the study guide. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Shri Rupa Goswami ki jai.
Jai.